you all for coming to this research presentation entitled The Impact of Oral Language Strategies on Second Grade Skills in the Areas of Reading and Writing. This research was completed for my master's thesis to be completed in this following summer in June 2013. It is also part of a greater body of literature looking at the issue of literacy in the United States and the reasons why so many Americans struggle to read and write well enough to complete their daily jobs. This research initially began as an opportunity to use the education I received here during my previous 3 years at the College of Idaho in a practical and authentic way. While completing my bachelor's degree here at the College of Idaho, I participated in the speech and debate program at the college, ultimately earning a minor in speech rhetoric. This was a new and really valuable experience to me, as it was a new opportunity, one that I previously had not participated in, and really showed me personally the value of oral education. In looking at this then, I developed a research program wondering if this personal experience that I had had would prove true for my students as well. I also incorporated my understanding of reading from my reading minor, my second minor at the College of Idaho, and its importance for students in evaluating the effect of oral language on students in reading and writing. The purpose of this study then was to supply information on the role of oral language skills on reading and writing abilities. This research builds upon previous research that showed connections between reading and writing and oral language. The gap of research is also addressed by looking at both reading and writing, something previously rarely addressed. My two research questions then that guided this study that I did was to discover any correlations between oral language abilities and reading and writing. A little bit of the background on my study is that this was a mixed method study using quantitative numerical data, such as measures of oral reading fluency, but analyzing this data instead of like a t-test or some sort of mathematical procedure, but instead more of a mixed method study where I looked at it qualitatively, analyzing it for easy themes that could be developed and then implemented within the classroom. This was done to provide valid, reliable data that was really easy to implement and apply within the classroom as an educational strategy that had demonstrated research backing. This research project also included an in-depth research component in the form of a literature review. It looked at the 3 areas previously mentioned, analyzing the effects of reading and writing and the impact they have on students' futures. Surprisingly, the data actually indicates that 1/4 of adults cannot read well enough to do their daily jobs, and 3/4 of high school seniors cannot write well enough to be considered proficient. This literature also looked at the research regarding the Matthew effect. The Matthew effect has been studied by researchers excuse me, as they attempt to discover why struggling readers and writers do not tend to make the same academic gains as those of their peers. This included hard study, which actually found that by age 4, the average student in a welfare family would have experienced 13 million fewer words than a student in a working class family. Lastly, this literature review looked at the oral language activities and explained at each of the research that had previously been done on the 6 different oral language strategies that I implemented within my study. As you can see, these are the 6 oral language activities used in this study, and I'll go over just a little bit on each one in case you're not familiar with the little particulars of each one. So the following 6 oral language activities were used: readers' theater, book chats, poetry recitation, show and tell, I have, who has, and oral storytelling. The first one, readers' theater, is basically an opportunity for students to have a repeated reading in which they read a fun passage, so they'll play different parts and be able to practice back and forth, and then eventually present it to the class or to younger students. And this one in particular is the one that has been done the most in research in order to analyze it. So it's got the most research backing on it and is kind of a great way to practice fluency and get students to read that maybe might struggle otherwise to be motivated to do. The next one, book chats, is another fun opportunity for them to just integrate literacy into something enjoyable and something that they will actually want to do within the classroom. And basically that's the form of they're going to read a book or read a short story and then present it in a fun way that makes other students want to read it. So basically like a fun little book commercial, typically not very long, about maybe 20 seconds, but really gets them using language in a way that they're motivated, and then obviously then other students are going, well, that student said this was amazing, I want to read that book. And it becomes a popular thing in the classroom. So then the next one was poetry excitation, and this one I think we had the most fun with in my study. As you saw previously, we did it with second grade students, so we did a lot of fun poetry. And this basically means things like around Thanksgiving, we did Turkey Day poetry, which the kids just absolutely loved. Really enjoyed it, wanted to add emotions, and wanted to do it again and again. Again, showing that the motivation factor really helps them to want to use this oral language. My fourth one was show and tell, which for second grade students is kind of, you're going, I think that's more reserved for kindergarten students. But what I found in this study is that show and tell can easily be adapted to second grade, even fourth grade, even up through high school. If you're having students present something that they made or something that they wrote, it's a great opportunity, validates the writing that they did, and really enhances their own understanding of what they did. So, show and tell was modified for second grade students in that they a lot of times would show, like we'd do a writing sample, and they would show it along with their picture, and we had some students that you couldn't hardly get them to talk in class, and then you would get them up there, and they'd be so excited for their turn, and they'd, oh my goodness, I wrote this story, and it was about this elephant, and he talked, and this and that, and they'd go on for 2 or 3 minutes before you were like, okay, sorry, but your time is up, we have to move on. So again, the motivation factor was definitely at play here. I have Who Has is probably the one that most people are not as familiar with. It's just an educational game in which students basically receive cards, and it'll say like, I have bet, who has said? Then the next person, I have said, who has had? And they basically will try to get it down to as little time as possible and that they can read it and sit down. And it's just an awesome game where kids are not realizing, oh, I'm learning sight words, but they're so pivotal and so helpful for the future. Lastly, we did oral storytelling, which again goes along with the show and tell, but just giving students an opportunity to really talk and not have it be something that they have to say, I did this, but just giving an opportunity to demonstrate their own oral language in opportunities such as, what are you doing over the break? You ask that question, and suddenly you have 24 second graders that are, Miss Tatum, please pick up me. I know exactly what I'm doing. So this is an awesome opportunity, again, to just encourage those students that might be like reticent to use that language to just really be excited and into it. So those were the 6 strategies I used. A little bit of the methodology. As I said, this was a mixed method study that focused on determining differences between the control and experimental group, and also themes relating to growth in a particular category. So this might be such as phonics, that to see, do oral language activities actually influence fluency? Does it help them to understand? The next section, my participants. So this was done in the Northwest region with second grade participants ages 7 through 8. The experimental group had 22 student participants, while the control group was only 12 student participants. So that was one thing. Unfortunately, I did not receive nearly as many of the permission slips back from the control group as I did from the experimental group. So a little bit of the data collection process can be seen up there. It was fairly standard and predictable, basically giving out permission slips, conducting preliminary data collection and analysis, and then giving the prescribed language treatment for a total of 8 weeks before students were again tested and the data was compiled. Lastly, as I stated, the data was analyzed, including providing conclusions and recommendations for future practice and study. As I said, there were 4 data pieces that were used throughout this study. The core phonics survey, measuring, as you might guess, phonics. The Idaho reading indicator, measuring reading fluency. Ames Web Progress Monitors also measuring reading fluency on an informal basis, and a writing rubric based on the 6+1 writing model. GAIN scores were analyzed in order to compare the control group and experimental group, including looking at the Matthew effect, as I previously mentioned. This led then to three main conclusions. A correlation exists between oral language abilities and reading abilities. A correlation also exists between oral language abilities and writing abilities. And lastly, academic gains were made in reading and writing, but were limited by the ceiling effect, in which students reach the highest score possible and then cannot progress any further. Overwhelmingly, the data pointed to a correlation between oral language abilities and reading abilities. The only instrument that did not reveal this was the Idaho Reading Indicator, which is an official assessment given once in August and once in January. This may be for several reasons. One reason may have been that the test was not given until mid-January, while the treatment ended in mid-December. Another reason may have been that the test was given once at the beginning and once at the end, and is only a 1-minute reading indicator, which leads to some variability. Lastly, this test was also given by an unfamiliar proctor, which for second grade students can make a huge difference as they can become overwhelmed and it can affect their scores. Likewise, all the data in the study revealed a correlation between oral language abilities and writing abilities. The instrument in this study was a rubric based on the popular 6+1 writing model, commonly used to teach writing skills. Two of the instruments used in the study were likely affected by the ceiling effect. In the core phonics survey, there were multiple students who achieved the highest score possible, greatly affecting the overall result. Likewise, in the initial assessment for the writing, there are multiple students who achieved the top score. This makes it difficult to measure growth because they can only achieve the score they received on the first assessment. There are multiple recommendations for future research in the form of several questions. First, if the population was changed, would the results have remained the same? Secondly, if more tests or different tests were used with no ceiling effect, would the results have been different? Lastly, if the categories for high, medium, and low were changed, would there have been a difference in the data results? All of this lends itself to the recommendation that oral language activities be used frequently in the classroom in order to achieve reading and writing gains. The data and the research in this study support this, as well as previous research that has been done. In addition, the researcher noticed that the students were consistently motivated and excited to complete these oral language activities. This is a secondary reinforcement that the activities were helpful and enjoyable as a way to practice language within the classroom. Thank you.